So here it is, as threatened, the event to make all your Christmases come at once, the 20,000 subscriber Q&A. Now, I just want to say thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I have not prepared answers to them because I thought that would be cheating and it would be less interesting. Or it could be a complete fuck up. I guess we'll find out, won't we? So let me just dive straight in. As I said, I'm going to read the questions posted on Patreon first. So we'll go with the first question, and it was from Mr. Villain. Out of every story you've read, which angered you the most? Good question. And this is probably a good reason why you should think about your answers in advance, and I haven't, because there are so many stories that have angered me in the last 12 months, but not one in particular comes to mind. And in fact, I think what angers me more is not just the stories themselves, but often the reactions to stories. And in this case, I'm talking about the regressive left reactions to stories, so that, you know, every time there's a terrorist attack, elected officials go on TV and tell us that Islam is a religion of peace, that this is not a reflection of their religion. Then we have to light candles on bridges or the Eiffel Tower in solidarity. Some idiot sings a John Lennon song, and we basically just continue on and nobody does anything about it. Same with a lot of idiotic feminist stories. Maybe one you will recall, maybe, I don't know how long ago it is now, quite a few months ago, the story out of England about it being a potential hate crime now if you approach a woman, and it's I think the language used was an unwanted advance. These kind of stories really annoy me. One's about girls not wanting to see images of fit, athletic women on billboards. I think this angers me because it says to me that our society is becoming weak and pathetic. We can't even look at images of attractive, fit people because we might get triggered. A lot of the social justice nonsense just kills my will to live sometimes. The idiocy on university campuses. So I know that's not probably the answer you're looking for, but that's what comes to mind. It's usually the regressive left responses, the complete denial or the inability to take responsibility or to address issues honestly. Next question, Mike Barbarossa. What are your religious, non-religious beliefs? Have you always held the same belief? Absolutely, yes. I am an atheist, a lifelong atheist, never been anything else. I flirted with Buddhism. I never called myself a Buddhist, but I learnt meditation. I've been to Buddhist meditation retreats. I was in a monastery for a couple of months, just practicing meditation. And when you get down to it, I wasn't caught up in the religious aspect of Buddhism. I was really just trying to meditate. And I don't think Buddhism at its core is even a religion. I mean, there's no one to pray to. Even if you go to Southeast Asia, you would think there's someone to pray to because there are Buddhist images in temples everywhere, and people go in and they burn incense and they make wishes and they throw money and they do all kinds of things. But that's just really cultural superstition. It has nothing to do with Buddhist practice. So that's maybe a useful distinction. I was only ever interested in Buddhism for the meditation side of things, and although I've stopped really doing any regular meditation practice, I thoroughly recommend it to others. Let's have a look here. Richard Simonson Jr. What's your favourite AFL footy team? I started rooting for the Kangaroos when it was still the VFL. Well, I'm also old enough to remember when it was the VFL, and I have been a Carlton supporter all my life. Since, I think, about 1979-80. It's about the first time I can remember following a team. Liam Ashton, what do you think 2017 will bring us, and what can people like me do to help red pill more people? I'm surrounded by people that couldn't care less about world events or politics, and people on the left. They believe every article in The Guardian BBC puts out. It seems that the fake news agenda is already working. I feel like if I speak out against the mainstream agenda, that I will be demonised and isolated, especially in the workplace, as I am so outnumbered. Well, what do you think too? Well, here's the thing about predictions. I generally try not to make them. Now, I've done a couple of videos. I obviously made a prediction about the US election, and I was wrong. And these are why I generally don't make them, because here's a little tip. No one can predict the future, and I don't care. When it comes to politics, economics, any one of these fields, predictions are worth nothing. You really should just, you listen to them by all means, but don't take them to heart. Don't pin your hopes on one person because you think they're smart necessarily. Anyone can get a prediction right through luck. But so I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this is going to happen, that's going to happen, Trump's going to be great, Brexit's going to work, or I'm not going to say any of those things because I don't believe them, because I just don't know. That's the honest answer. What can people like you do to help red pill more people? Well, just challenge sort of received wisdom, if you like. But I would say to you, if you have a job that you like and it's important to you, don't deliberately sabotage yourself. There's a way to put your opinions out in the world without outing yourself at work. I have the luxury of not having a job that I need to protect so I can do what I do. But I would just say, just challenge people. And you don't have to be an asshole about it. You don't have to say you're wrong, your opinion's stupid. Just challenge people on basic things. Things like the wage gap. Depending where you are in the world, Australia, we call it the pay gap here. But this is so easily, demonstrably false. And if people bring this up in a casual conversation where some woman says to you, oh, women get paid less than men by 20% or whatever the number is this week for the same work, you say, actually, that isn't the case. You could go about it this way. Think about this. You could say to a person who thinks women get paid less, say, all right, I have two neighbours. One lives on the right and they get paid $60,000 a year. One lives on my left and they get paid $50,000 a year. So the person on the right gets paid 20% more than the person on the left. This is the only information I'm going to give you. Now, you have to ask me questions to figure out why they get paid differently. And I guarantee you that the vast majority of people are not going to ask what sex those two people are, because it's an irrelevant question. The first question you're going to get is, what do they do? That's the first question. And then if you say, well, if they both have similar jobs, they might say, well, how old is someone? Because it depends. If they're just out of university, they've got more experience. There'll be a whole bunch of questions that they'll ask before they even get to male and female, if they even get to male and female at all. And then you say, all those questions you ask, none of those things are taken into account when the wage gap is calculated. So that's just one issue and it's one point. Try and be agreeably disagreeable and find other avenues, socially, parties in your family. Do it that way. Next question. Question: Still a Devin Tracy fan? Question mark. Please share your current thoughts on him and his content in light of what looks like serious political disagreements regarding the 2016 US election. I think I saw some gloating from you in the comments of one of his videos. I love a lot of his stuff, but that smug fucker definitely deserved all of the post-election poking that came his way. I'll just take that first part of the question first. Yes, I am a fan of Devin Tracy, and I agree that he can be a smug, arrogant fucker, but his content is always interesting, different, he's funny, he's obviously intelligent, he is a master of the metaphor, he comes up with some great names for people. So I probably watch less of his content than I used to, but yeah, I'm still definitely a fan of his creativity. Yeah, and he can be a bit arrogant about his own opinions. He obviously was about the election, but we all suffer from that. I suffer from a bit of an ego myself, so I don't think he's a bad person. Yeah, I don't know. Don't want to spend too much time on Devin Tracy. Following a similar vein, in what way have your views changed from views you've expressed in any of your older content over the last 8 or so months? Any shifting at all? Has running your channel and engaging with others been a learning process that swayed you on any topic and moved you away from any of your original positions? You know, I used to just sort of take it for granted that equality of outcome, of course, is basically immoral, because what that implies is that you need to take from other people to make different people equal. But I always just sort of assumed that equality of opportunity was a given, that that's what we should strive for. But I'm not even convinced of that anymore, because I'm not sure what equality of opportunity means. So, for example, education. What does that mean? So every child's entitled to an education, but if you have money, you can send your kid to the best private school. A lot of kids are just going to have to go to the nearest public school. It's probably not a great school. Teachers are not great. Teachers are just trying to get kids to engage with work, let alone actually get them to learn something. So it's not an even playing field, and I'm not sure that it should be. I'm more coming around to the idea that, yeah, some people have it better than others, and most attempts to even the playing field either don't work, ineffective, and just a waste of time. And that guy T actually has swayed me a bit more on that issue. There's another issue of abortion, which is something, again, I never thought deeply about, because I don't have kids and I never really wanted kids, and so it was neither here nor there to me, really. It's just one of those things that was off the radar. But the more I look into abortion, I really can't justify killing potential human beings because it's inconvenient to your lifestyle. Lifestyle? Did I say lifestyle? Lifestyle. Yeah, I can't really wrap my head around that. So yeah, I get that, you know, if the mother's life is in danger, sure. If you've been raped, I mean, it's hard for me to tell someone or to pass a law to say that if you've been raped, you have to have that baby. I mean, I don't know what kind of mother you're going to be to a child that reminds you. I mean, the child's completely innocent, but I don't know. There has to be exceptions, but I can't just I guess I can't really accept the reasoning that you just get to kill potential human life because it's convenient for your lifestyle. And the sort of trend in, I don't know, just very recently, that women are now kind of bragging about the fact that they've had abortions, I find kind of reprehensible, really. And I'm not, as I said in the beginning, I'm not a religious person. This is not a religious argument. So there's maybe a couple of positions I've shifted on. And look, I will shift on other positions. I'm in my 40s and I have shifted on things over my life. I've become definitely more fiscal conservative, and so some things might change in the future. What fallout would you expect from the loss of your anonymity as independent man? Are you more concerned about personal life issues, or perhaps compromising your future employability? What's the most important reason you'd like to protect your identity today? Do you openly hold your opinions in real life with real people as the man behind the character? Jeez, you really got in a lot of questions here, didn't you? Are you more concerned? I'm not worried about pissing people off. My immediate family know that I have this channel, and they watch the content, some of them sometimes, and they don't. It doesn't affect our relationship at all, so I don't care, and I wouldn't anyway, even if they did. Perhaps compromising my future employability. Well, I mean, that's a possibility. I don't care because I don't really intend to go for a serious full-time job any time in the near future, but you know, it could come back to bite me in the ass, and I'll deal with that then. What is the most important reason you'd like to protect your identity? I guess it's just there are safety issues. People in this line of work get threats. I've had a couple of insinuations, shall we say. I haven't had any death threats or anything like that, but I think that's the main reason. I don't really care that much as far as job, family, anything like that. I'm not afraid of my opinions. So that last part, do you openly hold the opinions in real life with real people? Yes, absolutely. I mean, all the opinions that I speak into this microphone, I say openly in pretty much the exact same terms. It means slightly differently because you talk differently when you're in person, but they are what I believe. I say what I think, and I think what I say, unless I'm joking, of course. So thanks, 061469. Let's have a look. Ine. With Dave having regressive news, Sargon having the week in stupid, and Kraut and T starting a similar weekly regressive news about Germany, do you think you might start a similar weekly show but covering Australia? Something along the lines of Stupid Down Under. Well, I've already thought of this, and I was actually close to doing something like this, but with the recent sort of changes to YouTube, let's see how this works. So let's say I had 3, 4, 5 stories that I could stick together about social justice, idiocy in Australia, or political issues, or whatever. Throw them into one 20-minute video, say something like that, every week. Now, the way YouTube's working is that, as I understand it, you need to be consistently putting out videos, and I'm putting out about something like 4 or 5 videos a week. And if I package 5 stories into one video, I mean, that video could potentially be 3 or 4 stories, if 3 or 4 videos, because some of those videos, some of those stories will be related and they could go into one video. But I'm kind of doing myself a disservice if I just put out 20 minutes with 5 stories that takes 2 days to put together. I couldn't do that every day. So I'd rather cut them up and put them out. I mean, the recent video I did called No Gender December Bender, there were about 3 different stories in there, and they're all related, so they go together. But if they're different stories, I will probably do different videos for each. So long story short, no, I don't think I will. I may have done it even as late as 6 weeks ago, but I think that's off the table for now. But I might, when I get the ability to live stream, maybe I could do something like that once a week and just shoot the shit, maybe with a guest once a week. Maybe if for Aussies, maybe I could get someone like Gary Awesome on, or someone like that, or rotate it, and we could chat about the week's events. But see what the new year brings. Next, Joshua Hewlett. Could you explain how Australian politics were enveloped by social Marxism? Social Marxism. Do you mean cultural Marxism? Maybe Marxism? I mean, all of those terms are, when you get down to it, it's Marxism, it's socialist, collectivist tendencies. Now, what you have to remember about me is that I've been completely absent from Australia from the end of 2001 to the beginning of 2016. So 14 something odd years. So I was really absent from that period of time where social justice really blew up and the full force of Marxism started to show its face. I mean, it's quite a shock for me to come home and see people in universities openly parroting socialist principles, collectivism, equality of outcome. I mean, the Safe Schools program in Victoria is an example. I mean, the author of the program is a avowed Marxist. I mean, it's not a secret. I can remember the days when saying you're a Marxist was, something to be laughed at and ridiculed. But how the times have changed. So I don't know that I can answer your question. I mean, what we have seen and what I showed in a few videos back with Jonathan Haidt is the extreme push to the left in universities. And so I think we're producing more and more students with this kind of attitude, this collectivist attitude, and this push for social justice and equality, which is not equality at all. It's equality of outcome, which adds up to dividing people into groups and treating them differently to make them equal, which is the ultimate sort of hypocrisy of social justice. So I think the universities have had something to do with it. I think it's also a kind of navel gazing that, things get better and we don't realize how good we have it, and we lose sight of why we are where we are. We didn't get here through socialism or collectivism. We got here through, a form of free market capitalism. Of course, there's no pure free market capitalism. There's always been government regulation, but as we've liberalized trade, our economies have improved, our standards of living have shot up, especially in Australia. We've had something like a 25% increase in real wages above inflation in the last 20 years or so, 25 years, 30 years. So we've had a huge explosion in living standards and wealth in Australia. And I think this is something that Mark Latham identified actually in a book he wrote a couple of years back, that when you've got a sort of a burgeoning middle class who are self-sufficient and sustaining, they actually take less interest in politics and they pull back because they don't really need the state in their life. They have a job, they have income, they can support themselves, put their kids through school, and so they sort of pull back and they don't take much interest in politics. And that sort of leaves a void, and as you know, with voids they tend to get filled, and it's the squeaky wheels. It's the people who aren't content, who think that society is unfair and unequal, and so they start to push into the void, and they've occupied the void. Now, I don't know if that explanation is right or true or even on the right track, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head. And what machinery exists in the United States that could enable... Well, the machinery's there. I mean, the universities in the United States, as we saw in that Jonathan Haidt video, something like, 17-1 professors. I think it was in the humanities. 17-1, liberal versus conservative. I mean, the political diversity in universities is a disgrace, and then you heap on top of that the safe space trigger warning culture. It's just ripe for that sort of narrow, blinkered, authoritarian view to thrive, to the point where, and as we've seen, that a lot of people on the left now or don't think that they need to engage in actual arguments, just assertions. If you disagree with them, you're racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, and they don't actually need to engage in real discussion or debate. So I think the machinery is there in the United States. Trump represents a pushback against that, and it's a welcome one. And I just hope, for the sake of Trump and for the rest of the world, because I really do believe if America can't resist this push for social justice, then no one can. So I really, really mean it when I say I hope Trump is successful. I don't know if these answers are any good. I'm just spinning this crap off the top of my head. Next question is from Douglas Diedrich. Diedrich? Yeah. What do you believe to be Australia's best hope for stomping out the regressive left's shot at destroying what you ladies and gents have built? Britain has Brexit, we have Trump, but I'm still concerned for my friends to the north in Canada, which, like Germany, may be too late. What do you believe will strip their power down under? Yeah, well, we already have a right-wing government, but our right-wing government really has lost its balls and won't really stand up for conservative values. There are people in the party who will, but our leader definitely won't. He's more of a centrist. He falls over himself to speak favourably about Muslims. He thinks domestic violence is all violence against women. So he's got a lot of regressive tendencies. But we do have a party called One Nation, which is Pauline Hanson, so some people would refer to her as our sort of Trump candidate. Unfortunately, she's not the greatest. I mean, I'll invoke Batman. She's not the hero we need, but she's the one we deserve, which is kind of what Trump is. But I think I would prefer a better alternative to her, and perhaps we might get one in the new year with Cory Bernardi, who might be starting. I'll probably do a video on this in the next week or so. Cory Bernardi might be starting his own party, and he's a conservative on the right, and he's disenchanted, like a lot of conservatives are, that our Liberal Party, which is our right-wing party, is sort of weak on conservative issues. And so I think if he does that, I will definitely support him, because I find it difficult to support Pauline Hanson, because although she makes a lot of the right noises, she's not particularly articulate and not someone who I agree with on many other issues. But she is, like Trump, willing to talk about issues that other people aren't. Yeah, I'm concerned about Canada too. I mean, full regressive. I mean, just look at the Prime Minister there, and then look at sort of what's happening with these human rights commissions, Bill C-16, the Jordan Peterson saga. I mean, it is really concerning. Then you have, if you watch Feminism LOL, that channel, she's really cool. And what she's talking about that's happening in courts with sexual assault cases, and the burden of proof is being sort of flipped on men. It's a real worry. So, but hopefully, that swing to the far left will invoke an equally strong swing back from the right, and hopefully it's not a violent one. But I think conservative values have to reassert themselves, or they're fucked. Supersonic Dickhead. Sorry, I'm late. Yeah, you were about an hour late, but you're a champion. Why do you suppose there is such pessimism in the general public? You can show people data that things are improving in this field or that, and rather than becoming optimistic, they actually get hostile. Yeah, well, there are many people, call them social justice warriors as a blanket descriptor, that have a vested interest in painting the world as a horrible, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, you name it, world. Because if they don't, then their narrative kind of loses momentum. Douglas Murray, I think, the British Conservative, put it best when he said, The left has a demand and a supply problem. And that is that, fortunately, in the Western world today, there aren't that many real racists. There aren't that many real misogynists or homophobes or transphobes. And so they have to invent new enemies. And, of course, you take it to the logical conclusion, you get ridiculous things like women are more affected by global warming than men, or cities are built for men, not women, and all this kind of silliness. So they have to, if things are actually getting better, which I agree with you, they are, and you can look at people like Steven Pinker, who've been pointing this out for a while. You can look at living standards, and yes, I'm sure you can tell me that here and there the middle class is stagnated, but and a disproportionate amount of money goes to the top. But generally, overall, things are getting better, especially in the worst parts of the world. There are less and less people in poverty. So that doesn't fit the narrative that the world's a horrible place, because at the end of the day, the social justice warriors and the cultural Marxists, their end game is to rip everything down. And they're not shy about communicating this. I mean, they really do want to rip everything down, and they want to punish anyone that doesn't agree with them. So, and there's also, I think, pessimism, because there's definitely pessimism when it comes to politics. And I think that's because our politicians have become impotent. They are incrementalists. They might talk a good game, but ultimately they're weak on action. I mean, for example, go back 3-4 years now, you had, in rapid succession, you had David Cameron and Angela Merkel, and I think at the time Sarkozy, say that multiculturalism had failed, and then proceeded to let hundreds of thousands of people into Europe. And I think the public, there's a lot of people on board with the refugees, but there's certainly a huge backlash against it. And I think people have become disenchanted with politics and their leaders because they seem to be ineffective. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm just rambling here. Mr. G. Much of the statistical misinformation perpetuated by the media comes from legitimate sources which are usually misinterpreted. However, the raw data is incredibly difficult to make any sense to the average person. Oftentimes, studies such as one by Derek Bock and William Bowen withhold the raw data. In their case, they used aggregate as opposed to comparing like for like when looking at affirmative action. With such importance placed on statistics and such limited knowledge of complex regression models, how do you think we can dispel a lot of nonsense, especially when you consider how counterintuitive conclusions can be? Yeah, I guess you just have to communicate statistics in an easily digestible format. I try to do that through pretty charts and graphs, because often a graphic, can say a lot more than an explanation. It's two people sitting across a coffee table, someone explaining the same thing, when I can just throw you a chart, I think sometimes has a more powerful effect. I think it's different for different people. Obviously, everybody has their own biases. Some people just aren't open to new information. Some people are. And unfortunately, I think we live in a more and more polarized world where you kind of have to declare which team you're on, and then depending on that, nothing that you say can be trusted because you're on the other team, which I think is a sad state of affairs. So I guess it's just a commitment to truth and explaining things simply and easily. And I talked before about how to explain the non-existent mythical wage gap, and perhaps those kinds of ways of explaining things more simply get people to engage in something that's actually interactive rather than you just explaining it to them. I'm not familiar with these two guys that did the study on affirmative action, but I think another thing you need to do is become familiar with reading statistics and know what to look for. So in certain cases, when understanding whether you're comparing like with like, understanding, are you looking at raw numbers or percentages? Have the numbers been adjusted for population, if you're talking about racial groups or gender groups or whatever, and just make sure you know what you're looking at. And complex regression models, well, that's something that very few people understand, and I don't know if it's useful for everyone to know how to use complex regression models. So again, I think you've got to talk truthfully and simplistically when it comes to statistics, and try and engage people where they're at. I don't know if that helps. So I think that takes care of all of the Patreon subscribers. So I had to stop it there for a second just to switch over to YouTube. Now we'll see how we go getting through all of these. The first question, I'm starting from the bottom up, which I think those were the first ones asked. So Jim, my question is, why did you decide to become Independent Man, and when? Well, I probably, like a lot of you guys, I've been watching anti-feminist, anti-social justice videos for a long time. I think I decided that I really wanted to do a channel probably mid-2015. Still living in Japan at the time. I came up with Independent Man as a title to, it sort of, I guess, represents my ethos to some extent, and that is to be independent, objective, and truthful. I think you can still see it on some of the old videos. I think I said Independent Man committed to objective truth, something like that. Now the avatar is not my creation. It's from a animation program that I use. It's a stock character, but I liked it because I had this idea of a sort of a satirical superhero. He doesn't have any powers except his ability to analyze bullshit and debunk it. That's basically it. And so I did have a sort of an image of someone with a cape and a I am symbol on his chest or something like that, but I couldn't come up with that myself, so I just went with the stock character. It worked out well because that stock character has now been retired from that program, so people who join up and use the GoAnimate software can't use that character. It's not available for them, but because I had used it, it's in my library and I can continue to use it. But as I've said, I'm phasing it out because I can't have sort of license over it. I can put it into videos. I pay a subscription for that, but I can't monetize it in any other way. So, and I asked the company, I wrote to them and asked them if I could do that, but they said no. Yeah, so I think I set up Independent Man, I don't know, it was around September or so last year, but I didn't do anything. I was in Japan. I was really just sort of planning my exit from Japan. So I was selling stuff and getting rid of a car and all kinds of things, and finishing up at work and doing those kinds of things. So I didn't really feel, and I felt sort of out of it because living in Japan, all you get is what's filtered through the internet. And when I came back to Australia, I felt much more motivated. So because I was in it, and I hadn't been in Australia for almost 15 years, and I felt this sort of march of social justice through our institutions, through our media, and it motivated me to get my finger out and start the channel. Shane Jeffrey, my question would be, why do you think your channel is growing so slowly? Well, I didn't think it was. 20k is nothing to sneeze at, but your content is awesome and you're consistent, uploading many videos a week. Your videos are intelligent, entertaining, rare combination. You deserve to be as popular as Dave Cullen and Bearing. Well, that's very kind of you to say so. I don't think I'm growing that slowly. 20,000 subs in 9 months. It's not bad. So on that rate, 2 years I'd have probably 50,000. And I think, someone like Dave Cullen, he took quite a while. He was, as he's said many times, he started out just doing tech videos, and he didn't really take off till he started doing more of the social justice stuff, and he really has had an explosion in the last 18 months or so. Bearing, of course, and say Undoomed have really explosive growth, and I think I would put that down to a couple of things. I mean, Bearing, if anything, is really consistent uploader of material. I mean, he's always pumping new stuff out, and he's funny, and he does a particular type of video which is almost always a response video, sort of same thing as Undoomed, who's again different take. He's got a great voice, and he's got the tech skills to make his things look wonderful. But they both sort of concentrate on that response video market, and I think that's, whether that's intentional or not, I don't know, but I think there's a lot of people who really enjoy that stuff because it's, they turn on the video, turn on the internet when they get home from work, and it's 6, 8, 10 minutes of a funny takedown of a feminist or somebody else, and it's really entertaining. And I think maybe that's why they do well. But I think you get into dicey territory if you try to understand why certain people are popular. I mean, there are people with millions of subscribers which I can't even watch 5 seconds of them because of the jump cuts. So it's hard to explain why people get popular and others don't. For myself, I think I have a problem in that I spread myself too thin, cover too many topics. Maybe I should focus a bit more, but we'll see what the new year brings. Let's see here. That's not a question. Over here, that's not a question either. Okay, Q&A, kind of a classic internet discussion topic. Which do you think would win a fight to the death, and how? A silverback gorilla or a grizzly bear? Oh, I hate these kind of questions. Well, I think the gorilla can move faster, and maybe he can get up behind the grizzly. But I mean, if the grizzly swipes you with those claws, you're fucked. But I'm just going to go for the silverback. The Revenant scared the shit out of me, but I'm going to go the silverback. Watch. Oh yeah, I thought this comment was. This is not a question, but I actually said that I would read it out because I thought it was great. So this is about the 20,000 sub video itself, when I cut to the Game Theorist video, and he's the comment is jarring to go from one of the coolest voices on YouTube to that fucking Game Theorist douchebag piece of shit whose fucking phony cunt sunshine cheese dick delivery makes me want to see him run over slowly by an army tank feet first. I think that might be up there with the best comments ever on the channel. How fucked is the Western world? Right now, pretty fucked, but there are some signs of hope. Depends where you live. I would not be feeling particularly optimistic if I lived in Germany. Australia, well, we've got probably a little more time up our hands. Canada, geez, I think that's dicey. The United States, I think a lot of it comes down to whether Trump can be successful. But even if he isn't, I think that there's definitely a movement there that that's not going to go away. So yeah, pretty fucked. But I'm not. I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm reasonably optimistic, actually. Larry Rude Dude. Do you think the two-party monopoly of Labor and Liberal dominating the federal parliament is on the way out? So this is a question about Australia. If you don't know, the Labor Party is the left party, the Liberal Party is the right party. There are minor parties as well. There's the Greens Party, who get consistently about 10% of the vote. It could be, Larry. It's the thing about, I said about predictions earlier. I don't like to make them because I'm usually wrong. So do you think the two-party... well, there's good reason to think it is, because I think someone made the analysis. If you add up all the people who didn't vote, all the people who voted for minor parties, and all the people who have not enrolled to vote because these are young people, because they want to get out of voting in a country that has a compulsory voting system, you get to something like 40% of the electorate now is not voting for major parties, and that's a huge slice. I will be interested, as I said before, to see if Cory Bernardi starts his move, because if he does, I think that will be very interesting, because that's going to split the Liberal Party down the centre, probably. And I would strongly support him, because right now I find it difficult to support either party. And I don't think it'd be a bad thing if the two-party monopoly is on the way out. It might be a good development. Hello, I have a question. English is not my native language. And notice there, Russian countries like Baltic states, Azerbaijan, don't have such an extreme feminism problem. So the real question is, why is that? Is it because of government, or because of the people not responding to the threats that feminism provide? Or maybe I'm misinformed if feminism is a real thing in those countries. No, I think you're right. I think it isn't. I think, again, feminism, or the strength of it, has something to do with navel gazing, that a lot of the big problems in society largely have been dealt with, like extreme violence, unemployment, poverty. These kind of things don't afflict the West as much as they afflict poorer countries. And so in short, what I'm saying is that people in poorer countries have real shit to worry about, and we don't. And so, as the left likes to do, they like to invent things to worry about. And I think we become a softer society, and we become more maternal and nurturing and collectivist, and I think that that's unfortunate, because I think we need to consistently have goals and adversity to get over and strive for. So maybe that's it, not sure. Let me know what you think. Keep the evidence... I've seen different fans of people like you and other anti-SJW skeptical pro-liberty YouTube channels say that they've grown tired of videos against feminism and feel as if content creators like you are beating a dead horse. Do you think this complaint is legitimate? And do you see feminism taking a hard nosedive in the media and academia in 2017? Again, predictions, very reticent to make them. There's definitely a very visible pushback, but I think if the US election is anything to go by, we can safely say that the identitarians and the social justice warriors are just going to double down. So I don't think they're going to be browbeaten into compliance anytime soon. That's what I would say. Grown tired of videos? I'm sure that if you watch enough of them, you can get sick of them. I don't know. I mentioned response videos before, and people continue to make them and people continue to watch them. I don't know if they have a long-term shelf life. I don't actually do many response videos. I try and put in a range of sort of topics and approaches. So some are statistical, some are rhetorical. I have interviews, so I try to mix up the content as much as I can. But I guess we'll find out if people are getting sick of them. Let's see. There were quite a few people sort of upset that I'm going to get rid of the animations. Now, I should say that I have a subscription until, I think, August of next year. So I'll still be doing some animated, probably charts and things, but I don't think you'll be seeing Independent Man. Just wondering, okay, Just wondering which political party you would advise that best reflects and represents the viewpoint you and I'm guessing well, I would say if you're talking about Australia, Benjamin, I would say if Cory Bernardi splits off and makes his party, then he will be the one that reflects conservative values the most. And I should make since I'm an atheist, I'm not as concerned about social conservatism as I am fiscal conservatism. I'm more of a libertarian, if you like. So I would look forward to that. The problem, of course, if Bernardi breaks off away, then the Liberal Party becomes weakened, and I will take the Liberal Party any day over the Labor Party. The Labor Party is not the Labor Party of the 1980s and 90s. It's swung far to the left. So, and of course, the Greens are nuts. There's a lot of little minor parties that are irrelevant. And One Nation, of course, now Pauline Hanson takes some positions I like on certain subjects. I mean, she's about the only one talking in Australia about reforming the family law courts. But there's a lot of other things I don't like. She's a little bit sort of protectionist for my liking. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say on that. Okay, Uncommon Sense 360. What's your educational background? Also, what made you do SJW feminist PC culture videos? And lastly, what's more? Well, I think I really see and I'm sure a lot of you guys do too, because that's why you watch these type of videos. There's a really pernicious force marching through our society, and that's whatever you want to call it: cultural Marxism, collectivism. And I think it's really poisonous. And I'm halfway through my life, and I thought, well, instead of just going out and getting another job and being safe and comfortable and all the rest of it, that I would do something that I really believe in. So I'm going to continue to do it until I run out of money. What's your education background? So I did an undergrad business economics accounting. Economics accounting, back then you could do double majors. Apparently you can't. Well, not at that uni anyway. And I also have a master's degree in applied linguistics. Yeah, that's all that one. Thank you. Recommendations for people to check out on YouTube who cover Australian political content. I can't actually, if you're talking about purely politics, there's a guy who doesn't have a YouTube channel, but he has a blog. It's called The Red and the Blue. I think he actually ran for a seat in Brisbane once. I think he's been active in the Liberal Party for many decades, and if I can, I might try and get him on for an interview. So check that out, The Red and the Blue. If I remember, I might put it into the comments, into the description of this video. Preferably, but not necessarily conservative. Yeah, well, he's definitely conservative. There's two young guys. I did an interview on their channel, but I didn't repost it because the audio was really terrible. But they call themselves Unshackled. They're on YouTube. They're very young. I think they're university. One of them's at least a university student. One might have just graduated, or one of them might be at high school. But they try to do a 45-minute podcast every week on politics. So go and have a listen to them. It's called Unshackled. How old are you? I'm 42. Should you sexual lobster? Okay, I'll go and have a look. Is YouTube your full-time job? Yeah, pretty much. What is your other occupation? Don't have one. What does a typical work week schedule look like for you? Well, I'm pretty much working on videos 6 days a week. So it's the good thing about working from home is that I get up in the morning and work 4 hours and then go to the beach, come back and work from 6 till 10 at night. So it's really, it's not a typical schedule, but I'm probably putting in a lot of hours, and I would hate to think what I'm earning an hour. It's pretty dreadful. Yeah, but that's it. It's not typical, and I think that's one of the things I like about it. I don't get up and shave and have a shower and put on the clothes and go to work and drive and get a park and do all that crap. I just get up in my boxer shorts and turn on a computer. But I earn fuck all, so that's the problem there. Have you considered teaming up with like-minded YouTubers like computing to create a... Yes, I have. I've even suggested that recently on a... well, didn't suggest it, floated the idea on a live stream. Because, you know, if you could put together a kind of a network, if this is the way YouTube's going. But I think it's like herding cats, especially if you're not in the same country. There's people I'd like to team up with. Dave is definitely one of them. Yeah, but we'll see. Just curious, what's the name of the animation software you use? It's called Go Animate. There are cheaper subscriptions, but you have to... I think you have to have their watermark on your videos, and so you have to pay $600 so you don't get the watermark. And there are other benefits to that, and there's other subscriptions that cost even more. Both really okay. When you started, did you think you'd get 20,000? No, I had no idea what would happen. I mean, it's weird when you start making videos. Could you put out a video and you get 0 views? There's no one watching. And so I did stuff like, I went into Gary Awesome's channel. I think he may have had, at the time, around 5,000 subs or so, maybe a little less. I'm not sure. I can't remember. And I would put links. I would, you know, make comments, try and get noticed, put a link to my video in there. He eventually noticed me. And I went from, on one day, I went from 13 subs and I woke up the next morning at 130. And it kind of built from there. Best and worst parts of the journey. There hasn't been anything really bad. I think... I mean, the thing is, the videos you make, you always think afterwards you could have done it better, you could have expressed yourself better, you could have explained it better, but sometimes you're just trying to get something in a digestible 8-10 minutes or whatever, and it just comes out as is. I don't think I regret anything. The best part is getting the recognition and the subs and people saying that what you're doing is good. I mean, you get people who say that you suck and you sound like an idiot or whatever, but most of it's been positive, so I guess that's the best part of it. Martin Dolby, what's your favourite beer? Don't drink beer, don't drink at all, really. Last time I had a drink was February. That's because I left Japan. It was sort of a see you later drink. Got absolutely hammered. Was brought up, was a VB drinker. That's for non-Australians. It's an Aussie beer. And then I really liked Crowns when I was young. But yeah, as I say, I couldn't care less. Didn't really like any of the Japanese beers, to be honest. Why is it that Australians are suddenly making some of the best commentary vids on YouTube? Don't know. Are they? I hope they are. Hey. Oh, do you think climate change globing? Did you say globing? Do you think climate change, global warming is a real problem? Yes, I think... yes, I believe that climate change is a real thing. Yes, I think that man-made climate change is a real thing. Here's the problem, though. I don't know that we should do anything about it. I'm not... let's go back to predictions. Every prediction made in this country, in Australia, in the last 10 years about what was going to happen. Our dams were going to be empty, we were told. They're over 90% full. We invested money in salination plants that have been decommissioned because we don't need them. And of course they got the predictions wrong, because predictions are nearly always wrong, and especially in an area like this where the science... I mean, predicting weather patterns, I think if you read Nate Silver's book about weather, something like, and I'm going to get these figures wrong, but when you predict the weather for tomorrow, they've got 90% chance of being right. You get out about 3-4 days, and that prediction drops to something like 30%. So that's 3 days away. So the idea that you can predict what's going to happen with the climate down the track, and the sea level is going to rise this amount. I don't believe any of that shit, and I don't believe that we have the evidence that we need to ruin our economies by forcing us into these silly renewables targets when, especially in Australia, I think we produce something like 1.5% of the world's emissions. And so does it even matter what the fuck we do? Now, I suppose that's an irresponsible position to take because, well, then if everybody says that, then nobody will do anything. I'm just still not convinced we need to do anything. Germany's coming out with what they call clean coal plants. I mean, technology's changing and it's improving. Solar's getting better. It's not there yet. But if you really believe in climate change and you're an economic rationalist, then a carbon tax is the way to go, because at least it creates a pricing mechanism so that renewables producers can come in and compete in a market. Distorted market, but it's a market nonetheless. When you have just targets like this state has to have 50% renewables by 2030, you don't have to be an efficient operator, because all that's going to happen is, well, we're going to get 50% of our energy from these guys. They don't have to compete on price. And so I think the whole quota system's shit. But I'm really not sold on the idea that we need to upend our economies to address a problem that no one knows how it's going to play out. And so I'm not a climate change denialist, but I am a climate change we have to do something about it skeptic. Mm. 8-bit. Old buddy 8-bit. What's the most interesting or surprising statistic you stumbled across? Oh, that puts me on the spot. Let's have a think. Probably when I looked into the sort of peer-reviewed research on domestic violence, and they say that something like 57 to 60% of it is two-way violence. That's men and women having a go at each other. But the one-way violence, where it's just men on women or women on men, that women do more of that than men. And I just assumed, like everybody else, that it was probably more the other way. In Australia in particular, the one statistic that grabbed me when it came to domestic violence was the fact that in Australia we have a respectful relationships program which is supposed to educate males on how to better respect women. And it was based on a bit of research, but when you look at the research, what it found is that women actually have less respect for men when it comes to violence. So that's to say that there was a bunch of scenarios these young people were given, and they had to answer, do you think it's acceptable to hit people in certain situations? So it was like, if you have a disagreement, if you cheat on them, if they throw something at you. So they were sort of escalating levels of violence. And in every single situation, women thought it was more acceptable to hit men than the other way round. And yet our entire domestic violence, well, not all of it, but a lot of it's about men respecting women, and that men don't respect women enough. And so if you look at the data, the people that don't respect other people the most is men don't respect other men the most. The next group is women don't respect men the most. Then men have more respect for women. And then finally, women have the most respect for themselves, which is not surprising. So that's the one I can think of right now. Is there an alternative to YouTube? Not a viable one. There's Daily Motion, there's VidMe, is sort of an upcomer. Of course, there's Minds, but they're all they're pale in comparison to YouTube, obviously. But I hope something will come along. What are your political views? I think I've covered them. I would, the political compass test. I'd say I am libertarian, centre-right libertarian tendencies. So I'll leave it at that. What AFL? I've already said. I had both of those questions. Carlton 42. Are you heading to the men's conference, Nikolai? Yes. Let's put it this way: 90% sure I am. 90% sure. I think it was June or July, but I intend to go. Put it that way, and I think you can count me in. What do you wish to accomplish with your channel? Well, I want to grow it. I don't want to just be content with putting out videos and people slapping me on the back. I would like to actually galvanize people and make change. And by that I mean it's not necessarily marching in the streets, but as white males did in the United States, they walked out quietly and voted in the ballot box to sort of reclaim part of their country. And if I can play a small role in a similar movement here in Australia, I'd be happy to. I'd love to be able to do that, and not just that, but just get the word out around the world. It's why I don't just focus on Australia. Question: what caused you to make these YouTube vids? I kind of already answered that. I don't think I have anything else to add. Is that I just felt a deep need to do it. Which is better, Woolies or Coles? I shop at Coles. So for those that don't know, Woolies and Coles are our two biggest supermarket chains. They kind of dominate here in Australia. Aldi's also here, but they're the biggest ones. I just shop at Coles because I think it's the one closest to where I park in the car park, and I just got used to going there. And I like their automated checkouts better than Woolies. I have a question for other subscribers. Okay, well I'll leave that. It's about a weekly wrap here. So again, I entertain that as maybe a live stream in the future. That's not a question. As soon as you... Yes, I won't be able to use the Independent Man mascot at all. He can't even do a small cameo. I mean, look, I could probably stick it in and get away with it, but I'm probably not going to do that. I'm interested in your background, but I realise... Well, I've already stated what I did at university. Out of university, I had an accounting job, bored the shit out of me, got into stockbroking, was in that for about 5 years maybe. I was in the research side, not the sort of on the phone trying to get people to buy and sell shit. Was writing the research and worked my way up. I started as a shit kicker. And I left just when things started to go well and making good money, which is kind of a pattern throughout my life. You always thought the Avatar was a bit lame. Oh, that's good. You won't be unhappy to see it go. What do you think of the Front National in Paris and the AFD in Germany? Do you think cultural authoritarians will have more or less power in 2017? Again, predictions, I hope they have less power. Not sure. As I said, I don't think they're going to go the way of shrinking violets. They're going to double down. I don't really know much about the... I mean, is that Marie Le Pen, Front National in Paris? Look, I'm not a fan of the European Union, and if she gets in, I think that could be a nail in the coffin. So, of course, I want right-wing conservative governments to put their foot down across the Western world, but I'm very wary of far right. Far right's as bad as the far left, as far as I'm concerned. So we want something centre-right. And if the AFD and the FNF fit the bill, then I'm for them. But I don't want to talk about stuff that I don't know particularly well. You probably get a lot better answers out of Kraut and Tea. Which is more important to you, truth, honesty, or all of the 7 virtues: chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, patience, kindness? Got to be honest with you, truth. Truth, that's a pretty easy one. All those virtues are nice, but I'm a flawed individual, and truth is probably the most important for me. What is your opinion of left libertarian ideologies? Libertarian socialism, market socialism, or binary? Look, I honestly have never heard of those terms before. Libertarian socialism, it sounds like a contradiction in terms. I'm really against collectivist movements. I'm very much for the individual. I'm very attracted to the American system and how it was founded, and the emphasis on individual liberty. I don't even know I have no idea what binary economics is. If I came across that in my econometrics classes, I don't remember it. Do you believe that Turkey is a loose end for NATO? Also, should NATO even still exist? I'm not that well versed on this topic of NATO, and I think when Trump says that NATO countries should do more for their own protection, or at least should pay more for it, I think that's fair enough. Does it need to be disbanded? I think there's important relationships that NATO holds together. Again, I'm not the best on this, and if it could be reformulated to strengthen or deepen ties or make better relationships, I'd be all for it. I'm not sure if it needs to go the way of the dodo. Do you believe Turkey is a loose end? Well, Turkey's taken a turn for the worse, as we've seen in 2016. So, yeah, I think, but Turkey's not by itself. There are a lot of countries that should be booted from certain councils, like the United Nations has Saudi Arabia on it for certain things that it shouldn't. So, yeah, I would like to see some renewed pressure on those countries. Coming channel changes. Sounds like progressivism, then regressivism. Okay, if you say so. Coming. No, it's as I said. I think the content's not going to change that much. Probably a little bit of the presentation. That's all. What is your opinion on the free market? I like it. So I just put out a video about Donald Trump not understanding what the free market is, and a lot of people think when you say free market that you mean unfettered, unregulated. Now, I don't think there's a market that's completely unregulated in the world. Every market has regulation. If you go back to Adam Smith, who's the father of all this, who talked about the invisible hand of the market, what people leave out is that neoconservatives often leave this out on purpose. He wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, and in that he said, loosely, that a unregulated market without any rules or laws would tend towards anarchy. So even the father of the free market didn't think that markets should be free from regulation, and I don't think they should be either. So I think there needs to be some rules. For example, there are people who believe that the stock market, you should be able to trade on insider information. Now, I don't believe that. I think everybody should have equal access as far as that goes. So I'm for some restrictions, but I think more free market than is currently the case, particularly in Australia and the EU. America's a bit better, but still I'd like to see a little more free markets around the world, to be honest. What's your favourite movie? If your answer isn't The Dark Knight Rises, you're wrong. The Dark Knight Rises is the worst of the three movies of Christian Bale as Batman. I think The Dark Knight is obviously the best, and that's probably because Heath Ledger just absolutely kills it as a Joker. Favorite movie? I used to think that Unforgiven was my favorite movie, the Clint Eastwood one. It was a pretty flawless movie. It changes over time because you see movies and you change your mind, but I'll go with Unforgiven for now because I can't remember anything else. YouTube really has become desperately suicidal lately, hasn't it? Look, I think what they're trying to do is figure out how to make money, and unfortunately, the route they're taking sort of hurts smaller channels and people who work independently. How old are you? I've answered that. Born in 1974. What are your thoughts on the Labor Party and the Liberal Party? I think I addressed that. I voted for Labor for economic reasons, despite the rhetoric perspective of Liberal being money savers and Labor. Well, the reason why Liberal Party has not had a very good record on fiscal restraint in the last few years is they really have tried, but they were lumped with the spending that Labor put into place. So, you know, they've tried to rope in sort of this increased education spending, which hasn't resulted in better education standards, actually worse. And so I think they're hamstrung in that perspective, and their outlook for the next sort of 5 years is not great either. The Liberals aren't doing particularly better on as being money savers or fiscally conservative. But a lot of that also is due to the fact that they can't get anything through the Senate, the upper house. So I know you're a young bloke, Lachlan, and you're only 18 or so. But when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, the Labor Party was a very different animal, and it was the Labor Party of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating. And Paul Keating represented the right faction of the Labor Party, and he believed in the 1980s you had the United States and England had you had right-wing governments, and they had an agenda of privatization, cutting tariffs, letting business run, opening up markets. And even though we had a left-wing government here in Australia, we did all the same things, and we put in a universal healthcare system. But we did all the same things. Paul Keating and Bob Hawke believed in the private sector. You don't hear that from the Labor Party today. They are very, very socialist in their thinking. They think big government programs are the answer. Keating didn't think that. Neither did Hawke. They had a balance. And so I can't bring myself to even go near the Labor Party. I think they're way too far to the left. But see, you're a young bloke that's grown up in an era where you don't know what it's like to have a Labor Party that's anything other than very far left. And the Liberal Party has also been, at least under Malcolm Turnbull, has been dragged to the left, because Malcolm Turnbull was under the impression that he was going to win over sort of centre-left people. But, you know, I think those hopes were dashed in the last election that they almost lost. And it's hard. I think it's hard to find people in the centre anyway on the left. It's hard to find people in the centre-left. So, yeah, no one has a very good record on being money savers, and they're both reckless spenders of the last 10 years, say. So, and look, even John Howard put in some silly sort of social welfare programs that, you know, once you put them in, it's hard to get rid of them. So no one really has the moral high ground on that one. How much of a Star Trek fan are you? I'm not a Trekkie. I used to come home from work sometimes when I was in university, and I would watch the Deep Space Nine stuff. I think was on at the time, and I used to love watching the real old stuff, the original stuff, because it was funny. It's just hilarious. It still is. I liked the most recent Star Trek. There's been 3 of them. The most recent one sucked. I didn't mind the Khan one, and the one I think the first one of the new series, I didn't mind them. I know people don't like them. There's, you know, problems with the continuity and all that, but I'm not a Trekkie, so I don't get really upset by that stuff. YouTube unsubscribing you, dude? Oh, okay, it's not a question. Sucks that YouTube had to change the algorithms again. Well, I think that's it. We're done. All right. Thanks for... oh, I missed that one. I missed both of those. What is your religious denomination opinion on religion? Yes, I'm an atheist, lifelong atheist, as I said before. I have more respect for religious institutions for their values, Judeo-Christian values that have informed the Western civilization. I don't have a lot of respect for their supernatural claims. I'm someone who believes in evidence, and there's no evidence for that stuff, so I don't bother with it. Q&A, anal. Not... If I'm giving... still, you know, did a bit of that when I was young. Didn't really take to it. Receiving, not into that. But who knows? You know, it's a brave new world. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks very much for sticking around. I wonder if anyone even listens to this whole thing, but if you did, good on you. And there'll be more of it in 2017. Thanks for listening.